Hello and welcome to the Irish FIRE podcast. I'm your host, Michael Houghton. I'm an entrepreneur, investor, and financial independence enthusiast, sharing my financial freedom journey. Stay tuned and welcome aboard. Some of you will be aware that I made the decision last year to go back to full-time work. And I'm pleased to report that recently I have started enjoying being a software developer again, which has been great because for a few years there, I found it a little bit tedious. But in recent times, I've managed to find enjoyment in it. In saying that, working full-time is very different to the joy that was working part-time. And it is starting to have a few trade-offs here and there. So I'm starting to notice that I'm tired all the time. I'm not getting as much time as I would like with the kids and with things like exercise and so on. So it is a challenge. I'm not going to lie, it is a challenge. But I am keen to see this through. And today's episode relates to a different approach, something which we should all consider as possibly our first FIRE approach. So let's jump over to the question, and it's from Dean in Galway. And he says, given the high tax rates in Ireland, and after reading your latest portfolio report, it looks like you're adopting a Barista FIRE approach. I know this is something you haven't covered much of, but given it looks like you're adapting this approach, it might be worth covering in an episode. So yeah, you guys might be aware that I am doing a monthly newsletter this year, which covers my portfolio updates as well as specific updates around everything that's going on with me. So if you haven't subscribed yet, jump along to firepodcast.ie and click on the members tab to sign up. Dean obviously is a subscriber and he's commented on the newsletter that I just sent out a couple of weeks back. So let's have a look at Barista FIRE. So what is the idea of Barista FIRE? And I did cover something similar. I think I called it Cruise FI many episodes in the past. But the basic concept of Barista FIRE is that you look to amass a portfolio, a huge portfolio that will compound over time. And you don't necessarily look to draw that down straight away, but it allows you to then go and effectively act like you are financially independent, even though you may need to still bring in, or you likely will need to still bring in an income. And the idea of the word barista is that this concept of going and working at a cafe, maybe in Southern Europe or somewhere like that, where you just need to cover your basic cost of living, but everything else you know is going to be sorted in your retirement. And at some point, your portfolio will compound enough to allow you to jump and utilize that portfolio and start drawing down from that portfolio. And Dean mentions that this may be a good approach in Ireland, given the tax rates that we have. So yeah, this is something that I've certainly experienced firsthand myself. So just a reminder, guys, I'm currently putting around €4,500 per month into our portfolio. To do that, the majority is done through a director's pension, which is an option that self-employed people have that have companies can put a fairly large chunk of money into their pension. And I'm basically utilizing that at the moment. If I were to pay tax on that and put it into the portfolio instead, then I would be losing around half of that to tax. So effectively, I would only be putting in just over €2,000 per month. So it is a noticeable difference. And that pension, at the moment, I could access in around 13 years, which would be when I'm 50, although there is talk of that age being pushed up to 55, so it's more likely 18 years away. So one of the approaches I've taken is I'm putting a lot of money into that pension because it is very tax efficient. However, it will mean that I won't be able to access that pension until I am 55, so in 18 years' time. The key thing here with Barista FIRE, and I think the key thing here which so many of us don't take into account, is the power of compounding over such a long period of time. And so I guess in many ways, part of me doing this podcast was to have that one day where I was going to sit down and be proud to announce, guys, I've finally done it. I'm officially financially independent. And I mentioned in recent episodes that I have a FIRE number of around €600,000, which would give me around €24,000 per year to live off. But I can guarantee you, the day that my portfolio hits €600,000, I will turn around and go, yeah, it's covering my basic expenses, but it's not really doing what I need it to do. And I'm going to keep working and keep building it, maybe up until €1 million. And we've seen this from other bloggers. Jorgen over at financiallyfree.eu, he did this. So his original target was something like €3,000 cash per month. Yeah, so his portfolio was producing €3,000 in cash. And yeah, he did that. And then he changed the goal to €7,000 per month. And now more recently, he's changed it to looking at how much capital he has. The goal is constantly shifting, right? And so I think it's important to identify this as something that it's quite easy to do. I think it's human nature for us to look for the shortest and easiest goal. But sometimes when we actually sit down and reflect a little bit and go, well, hang on, maybe this is a marathon and not a sprint. And so let's look at this in terms of my own portfolio first and foremost. So I currently have a portfolio of around €175,000. If I were to not touch that portfolio for the next 18 years and make an average of 7% return, that portfolio will just be shy of €600,000. It'll be €591,500 roughly. So for me to become financially independent at my first goal of 600K, I have to do nothing but wait 18 years, right? Very, very simple based on this logic, right? Likewise, and actually before I go on too far, I better explain that 7%. The 7% is one of these figures that gets tossed around. I think 7.1% is the exact figure, and is meant to take into account average market returns and counting for inflation. Now, the conservative in me says maybe you should be using 5 or 6% just in case, but for the sake of argument, I will use 7%, and my attitude is, well, if the returns are seeming to be worse than that, then that doesn't mean I can't contribute more money. In fact, if anything, one of the problems that there are at the moment is the share market feels a little bit high at the moment, and I'm pouring money in there. It would actually be more beneficial if I wasn't necessarily working so hard and timed myself to work when the share market was down. Unfortunately, however, as it is, most of the time, the amount of work I have as a developer is usually trending with the share market. As in, when the share market is up, I seem to have lots of work, and when the share market is down and there's fear around, suddenly my clients don't seem to be sending me as much work. But for the sake of point, we're going to use that 7%. Obviously, you guys can adjust that accordingly with your own numbers as needed. The key point is it should take into account inflation. All right, so that's where we quote these numbers of being, 600,000 or $1 million in the future. That should be an inflation adjusted target, and that's probably one of the key metrics to understand. If you are 25 today and you haven't got started yet, and you could find €900 per month to put into a pension or something like that, or some of that into a pension and some of that investing personally in your after-tax money, then you will have over €1 million by the time you are 55. And 55, folks, is still an early retirement. All right, so we don't have to be doing this in our 30s or 40s with the Barista FIRE approach. Sometimes it's just good to go, do you know what? We're just going to take it easy. We know what we're doing. We're going to cost average it in the long run, knowing that we will have a sizable pension and without causing too much stress at the moment. Because as I mentioned, trying to do this in a hurry, like I am at the moment putting $4,500 a month in, is exhausting. So currently at the moment is used to cover expenses and our current lifestyle now, and the other half is going into the portfolio. So I know that I could today work half the amount I'm working with zero impact on my livelihood at the moment, which is a good feeling, and which is basically how I was able to work part-time back when I first did it in 2019. And there are days where I wake up and all I would love to do is actually go back to part-time, but I am determined to try and continue to see if I could do this. And so part of that is me looking at these numbers all the time, trying to work out when I actually don't need to do this anymore. And I'm pleased to report that in April, it was my 3rd year anniversary of our first major investment. And according to the numbers, if I were to keep going like I am for the next 3 years, which would be 6 years in total, putting away that €4,500 per month, after the next 3 years, I should have roughly a portfolio of €380,000, assuming that 7% return. And if I were to just sit on that and add zero more contributions from that point on, after 15 years, by the time I turn 55, that portfolio will be over €1 million. So I give around 380,000, which would be a lot less than that because I obviously have some interest accumulated already over the last 3 years that I have made. So just to explain, I give 380,000 euros, which obviously would be less than that because in the last 3 years there has been a gain as well. So let's say I give maybe around 350,000 euros and I get 1 million euro in return, thank you to compounding. And so what's the takeaway here? What am I trying to actually get at? There is a point I'm actually trying to make. And that is that I think the FIRE community is too focused on the big FI number, when really what we should be focusing on is our retirement age. And the point that I give here is if I decided to not add a single contribution to my portfolio today and just leave it there and let it compound, then I will have 1 million euro by the time that I am 63, based on a 7% return. So my retirement age, as of it stands today, would be 63. And one of the challenges that I'm trying to adopt here is that I think we should be focusing on that number rather than our big FI number, because I think it's kind of amazing, right? 175,000 euros invested at 7% return for 27 years nets you over 1 million euros at the end of that process, right? And as I mentioned, that 7% return should take into account inflation. So when we actually take a longer term view of this stuff, we realize that we have a lot more control if we adopt the Barista FIRE approach. And as I mentioned, this allows us to invest now for a short number of years and potentially at some point go, right, I'm happy. I'll go and take a part-time job or cut back or work less in my case, knowing that I have the future secured and allowing me to enjoy the perks of early retirement without necessarily being there yet. And this is something which I did in 2019 and the early part of 2020. And I long for it again because it was a great hybrid approach that allowed me to enjoy work while also enjoying my time freedom. And the thing that made me get away from doing that was that I had this sense that I wasn't doing what I needed to do in terms of my future and retirement. So I wanted to do more with that. And that's why I've adopted this approach of going back to full-time for, say, the next 3 years. And then at that point going, right, we can now let this compound in the pension. I can go back to working part-time, cut back on the number of clients I have, take some nice cruisy projects, and just let myself go and play golf 3 or 4 times a week if that's what I want to do. Thank you, Dean, for your question. As always, guys, if you do have any questions you'd like me to cover on the podcast, reach out to me at michael@firepodcast.ie. As always, guys, I will catch you on the next episode. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're a big fan of the show, why not become an Irish Fire Podcast member for free? Members receive access to inside information that isn't shared on the podcast, as well as regular updates such as the monthly newsletter. To become a member, visit www.firepodcast.ie.